Hello, everyone. We meet again. Over the last little while, we have been talking about David and Solomon, the people. But over the next couple weeks, we're going to be shifting our focus away from people per se and focus our attention a little bit more on the temple that David and Solomon wanted to build and the presence of God in that temple. Now, if you recall, both David and Solomon, have something to do with the temple, because David wanted to build a temple, but he wasn't allowed to, and as you know, Solomon was the one who actually built the temple. Now, why are we talking about these things, or why will we be talking about these things? It's because if you look at your study material, there's a lot to cover. Okay, we're covering at least two chapters 8 and 9 in First Kings, and there's going to be a number of topics, right? But I think if I spend just a little bit of time with you today, we can kind of focus and direct our study. Okay, so one of the things that you guys will be working on is a worksheet like this about the temple. Your teachers might even get you to compare the tabernacle with a temple. The passage I want to focus on is 1 Kings chapter 8, verses 1 to 11. Okay, so on your own, make sure to read these verses, but I'm just going to read a few of them. Okay, I'm going to read verses 1, 4, 9, 10 to 11. Chapter 8, verse 1 says, "Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the leaders of the fathers' houses of the people of Israel before King Solomon in Jerusalem, to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion." Okay, moving on to verse 4. "And they brought up the ark of the Lord, the tent of meeting, and all the holy vessels that were in the tent. The priests and the Levites brought them up." And then from verse 9, "There was nothing in the ark except the 2 tablets of stone that Moses put there at Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the people of Israel when they came out of the land of Egypt." And verses 10 and 11, "And when the priests came out of the holy place, a cloud filled the house of the Lord." A cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of God filled the house of the Lord. Amen. Now, anytime you want to start a conversation about the temple, you also have to talk about the presence of God. And when you talk about the presence of God, you also have to talk about his glory. So how do I know that God was present, with the temple? I have a couple of reasons. As we read in verse 1, it mentions the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Ark of the Covenant represented the presence of God. Second, in verse 10, as we read, when the priests came out of the holy place, they saw a cloud filling the house of the Lord. Okay, so the fact that they saw a dark cloud filling the temple is also evidence of God's presence. Now, here's a question that you might be asking. how can God fit inside a temple? Right? You can't, you're right. He's too big to fit in a temple. All right? You can't squish him inside a temple. But all we have to know is that God was just saying that he was with Israel. So once again, the temple wasn't built to try and put God in a box, right? It was to show Israel that God was with them. And that's what Solomon was praying about in the first place. He wanted the people to know that God was with them, that he would hear their prayers and even forgive their sins. To know that God is a God who keeps his promises, that if he promised David such a thing, that he would surely build the temple that he promised. Oh, here's another thing. We talked about the glory cloud, right? Well, another thing special about that is this. We can know something about God, but we don't know everything about God, right? That's an important theme to remember as you walk in your faith, right? You're never going to perfectly know God. Now, I can't end our conversation without talking about this one last point, right? There's one requirement. There's one thing God required of Israel to hear their prayers. He wanted them to be committed to him with their whole hearts.